Welcome, everybody. I'm really glad that you're here, and we're going to get started. My name is Dave Rosenfeld. I am the Executive Director of the Solar Rights Alliance, and again, I'm just so glad that you're joining this webinar. The Solar Rights Alliance is the nonprofit association of California solar users. We believe that you and everybody else in the state has the right to make energy from the sun without unreasonable interference by the utility. We keep track of what the politicians and the regulators and the utilities are up to, and we alert the public when there's a threat to solar or an opportunity to expand solar for more people. And the purpose of this webinar is to do four things. We're going to do four things in the next time that we have here. We're going to review the revised proposal that the California Public Utilities Commission, the CPUC, just put out last week, and review in detail what it is. We're going to run through the impact that that proposal will have on consumers who want to go solar going forward. We're going to review how it's going to negatively impact the rooftop solar market and consumers. Number three, we're going to go through our theory for why continued public action, your action, can improve this proposal so that when the CPUC votes on December 15th, we end up with a plan that's going to actually keep rooftop solar growing and keep it in the hands of everyday people. And then finally, I'm going to go through a couple of actions, four actions in particular, that you can take tonight or tomorrow right away to start to make that happen and ensure that we can keep solar growing and for all kinds of people. I want to again just say welcome, and over 2,000 people have signed up for this webinar. Many people are watching on our website. Many others are watching on social media channels, and we're just glad that everybody's here. Many of you submitted questions in advance. We're going to try to get through as many of those as possible. And then if you're watching from a social media channel and you have a question, you can just pop it into the comments box and we'll see it and we'll try to get to that as well. If you are watching from a social media channel, please share this live stream. You can just do that by just hitting the share button and it'll post on your timeline so other people can see it. I'm going to go through in a moment about 20 minutes of just an upfront presentation and just throw a lot of information at you, maybe 25 minutes, and then we'll start going through the questions. And I'm not going to be able to get to every single question. One thing I would invite is if I don't get to a question by the end, don't worry, you're going to email this, a recording of this webinar out to everybody that registered for this live stream. And I'll also include ways with which you can contact us and follow up with questions if we didn't answer your particular one. So we're going to follow up. We're also going to post a recording of this webinar on our website. So either way, we're going to get your questions answered, and you'll have ways to contact us through all of that. Before I get started, I just want to also just say thank you. This has been a really long campaign. It's been a pretty grueling campaign, and but your actions have been just extraordinary. More than 170,000 people in California have done some kind of action, written, called, marched. It's been extraordinary. And we've had to beat back some really nasty proposals. And we've done it with incredible amounts of public action. More people have taken action on this issue than any other in CPUC history. This just demonstrates just how awesome rooftop solar is, and just how awesome people who support solar, whether you have it or you want it someday, are. So you really should. We're not done yet by any stretch. We've got a real big problem and a fight on our hands over the next month. But I just want to take this opportunity to say thank you, and please, we're going to have to keep it up, so please keep it up. So let's get started with the presentation. I'm going to throw up a slide here. Just quickly about the Solar Rights Alliance, I want to just make sure I say this again. We believe you have a right to make energy from the sun without unreasonable interference by the utility. We have about 100,000 people on our list, mostly solar users in California. And then we also welcome people who don't have solar but might want it someday. I'm the one and only paid staff person, and otherwise we're totally volunteer driven. Our board of directors, I listed them on the right. They are all solar users from different parts of the state. And we are just laser focused on our mission of just being able to make sure that people who have solar or people want it someday have a voice. And Lord knows that we need a voice, because as we're about to go through, the utilities certainly have a voice and somebody needs to counterbalance them. So the bottom line, and the CPUC, by the way, I hate using acronyms. That stands for the California Public Utilities Commission. They are the deciders here. And They are the state regulators who are dealing with this whole thing. And the bottom line is that the CPUC has just made a revised proposal on rooftop solar, and it is still too extreme. And if it passes, and it is not passed yet, it's just a proposal, but if it passes, it will make it more expensive for people to get solar going forward. And if the past in other states, our experience in other states is any guide, if this gets implemented, it's going to cut future solar adoptions in half from what it is today. So that's the bottom line of what is going to happen if the CPUC's extreme new revised proposal gets passed. And hopefully we have something to do with making sure that doesn't happen. Before I get into the CPUC's proposal, I want to just run through, why do we need more rooftop solar? This may seem kind of like, okay, no duh, but I think it just bears repeating that there's a lot of really good reasons why it is not just in the interest of us here on this webinar to have more rooftop solar for ourselves, but why we just ought to be growing it. And the obvious one is just people ought to have more control over their energy bills. And the days should be over where people have to choose between paying their grocery bill and paying their utility bill and buying groceries. But it's more than that. It's blackouts also. Now, most people who have solar just have solar, but increasingly people are getting batteries. And there could be a day where batteries are standard with solar and it would be accessible and affordable to everybody. And that'd be a good thing because solar plus batteries is actually like the only solution that works to protect individuals and households and schools and churches and entire communities from blackouts. And blackouts are our new normal. I mean, we kind of escaped the big thing this summer, but it was still a flex alert week that was really, really unnerving. And with solar and batteries, we can make that a lot less prevalent and maybe even a thing of the past. We also need more rooftop solar because the state itself says that we need it. I mean, believe it or not, state planners say that we have to triple all forms of solar by 2035. That's just a little more than a decade away in order to meet the state's clean energy goals. And we have to triple the solar farms that we have from what we have today, and we have to triple the rooftop solar. And so some of you really like the state's clean energy goals. Some of you might not like it. Regardless of whether you like it or not, that is what the state is saying that they want to do. And not only that, they want to increase clean energy, but they also want to get people into electric cars and using induction stoves and heat pumps. And in order to be able to do that, we need a lot of renewable energy. And the state itself says we're going to have to triple rooftop solar. So that's another reason why. And while we're talking about solar farms, it's worth mentioning that solar farms and wind farms and some of that really large scale infrastructure comes with some additional downsides. I mean, we do need to increase those and we don't have a problem with that. But it's just to say they come with downsides. And the cartoon that's on the right of the screen, I think is a cheeky way of just describing that there's environmental impacts and wildlife impacts. And then there's just kind of like the sort of intuitive common sense of going like, wouldn't you want to use our rooftops as much as possible in the built environment before you start using open space? So that's another reason why we need more rooftop solar, but that's not all. It also is the case, remember I just said that the state says that we got to triple the amount of solar that we have in this state. Well, we're not on pace to do that, even if we just kept things going the way they're going. The gold in the bars is rooftop solar, and the blue is solar farms. And the sun, if you look in the middle of the chart, is where we need to be by 2035. And the top of the bar below the sun is where we're actually going to be in 2035 if we just keep both large scale and rooftop solar growing at the current pace. We're not going to make it. So we actually need to step it up in both forms. And you can notice here that basically about half of solar is rooftop solar. So you can't get rid of rooftop solar and just get all the way there. With solar farms, we need to keep growing both of them. And that's, again, if you take the state at its word that it wants to meet these clean energy goals, then it's kind of just a no-brainer. But there's still another reason why we need more rooftop solar, which is that rooftop solar saves all ratepayers money, even if they don't have solar. Some of the most detailed energy modeling that has ever been done did two studies. One that said, let's see what happens when the state tries to hit its clean energy goals with just solar farms and wind farms and large-scale infrastructure. And then let's do another scenario that has the state trying to hit its clean energy goals with solar farms and wind farms, but also with a lot of rooftop solar and batteries. It turns out that that second scenario, the one that is a hybrid that has large scale and rooftop, is $120 billion cheaper over the next 30 years than just doing it with solar farms and wind farms. And that's, to give you a sense of how much money that is, that's $300 per ratepayer per year for the next 30 years. And the savings come from reducing a lot of that infrastructure cost, especially the long distance power lines that have to connect all of that far away energy sources into our towns and cities. We can actually cut $120 billion of costs out of the system, saving everyone money. And that's not just a tomorrow thing. In 2018 alone, there's so much rooftop solar on the grid and also energy efficiency that the state actually canceled $2.6 billion worth of long distance power line projects. And they said the reason why was because of rooftop solar and because of energy efficiency combined. And so this is a today thing, and it could be really a tomorrow thing. Rooftop solar is a total success story. There's 1.5 million solar rooftops in this state. And just think, for those of you that were around 15 years ago in California, there wasn't much solar at all. And if you wanted solar, you had to be either rich or really, really technical to get it. And today you don't have to be either. And in fact, just under half of all new solar is going into working and middle class neighborhoods. You can see this on the chart on the left here. And this is from the Lawrence Berkeley Lab, which does a solar demographic study every single year. And what's even more remarkable is if you take a look at the bars on either end of the chart. So look at the blue bar on the left. That's the number of households that went solar that make less than $50,000 a year. And then take a look at the green bar on the right. That's the number of households that went solar that make over $250,000 a year. More people are going solar in the under $50,000 a year category than those who are going solar over $250,000 a year. This is amazing. And we're just getting started. I mean, 1.5 million solar rooftops is cool, but there's no reason why we can't be driving towards 10 million solar rooftops, all attached to a battery. This is like a disruptive technology. It's like we're cell phones and cars and TVs. In the early days, it's something that wealthy people get, and then gradually it's something that everybody can get. And we're midstream through that, and we want to keep that going. Here's another data point. Take a look at the orange chart. Let's bring that up. And this is the per capita solar adoptions by county. And if you take a look, the highest per capita solar adoptions are happening in some of the most low-income counties in the state, largely in the Central Valley. And all you have to do is just drive through a working class neighborhood in Fresno, and you can see that with your very own eyes. And many of you on this webinar are among those families that got the solar and are remarkable and would not have been able to get it even 5 years ago. So what's the issue that's at hand here? It's a policy that's called net metering. Even if you have solar, even if you don't know what net metering is or you've never heard of the word, you know what it is, because here's what it is. When you have solar panels on your roof and they make energy, the sun's shining, the first thing that it does is it powers your home in real time. It powers that fridge and the lights and the AC and all that kind of stuff. But oftentimes you make more energy than you're actually using. And at that moment, at any time where you're making more energy than you're using, then that extra energy flows out your house, spins your meter backwards, goes into your neighborhood. And then the utility sells your energy to your neighbors, and then at the same time credits you at the same price that they sold it to your neighbors. This makes sense because the utility didn't pay to make that energy, you did. And the cost of the poles and the wires in your neighborhood is negligible, and you pay for it anyway through all the other things that are on your bill. And so that's what net metering has been. It is an incredible success story. It has allowed people to participate and help to build a utility, a grid of the future. And the utilities hate it because they're a monopoly, and they don't want to pay you. They want you to pay them. And the idea that there's any kind of arrangement that gives you some power in the equation, they want to get rid of, and they've been trying to do it ever since net metering started. So who are the players here? There are three. Obviously, there are the utilities, and it's a very powerful monopoly. They have been trying to stop rooftop solar from the very beginning. Back in the days when we were trying to get Governor Schwarzenegger to go big on rooftop solar, they were there trying to get him to stop him from doing it. Back in 2015, the last time the CPUC took up the issue of net metering and wanted to make changes, they were there trying to gut the policy, and they're here today. And they have been pressuring every level of government, but especially the California Public Utilities Commission. So this is the second player. This is the one on the left. The official deciders is the California Public Utilities Commission. They are an unelected group of 5 regulators, and they make decisions in all matters related to things that are on your utility bill and related to rooftop solar. And so it's a very powerful agency, and they're going to be the ones that make the official decision here. But then we have the governor, Governor Newsom, the leader of the state, and also the person that appoints the members of the CPUC. I want to make one thing clear. We're going to get into this a little bit more later, but many of you, probably maybe even all of you who are watching, have submitted sometime over the last year a letter to Governor Newsom asking him to take a stand. And many of you have gotten a form letter back from the governor saying, implying, and really kind of saying outright, hey, I don't have anything to do with this. This is in the CPUC's hands. Don't buy it. Everyone who knows, who is in Sacramento on the inside, knows that this governor and most governors that came before him get themselves very much involved in the affairs of the CPUC and the other agencies that are part of the executive branch. It makes sense. The CPUC is doing things that affect his clean energy goals, his climate change goals, rates, blackouts. These are all things that the governor wants to make sure that he is attentive to. And so, of course, he gets himself involved in the affairs of the CPUC. No, he doesn't have a vote. No, he doesn't have a formal veto. But governors have ways of making phone calls to people or having people make phone calls that make things happen. He's a very powerful person, and he is absolutely a player here. And I want to make sure that you all know that. So let's get to the CPUC's revised proposal. Here's the essence of it, and then we'll kind of unpack some details. The CPUC's proposal, which will affect future solar users, it will be a 75% average cut to that net metering credit, and it'll happen overnight. So if this goes into effect, and again, it is just a proposal, it is not enacted yet, it would cut by 75% on average that credit that consumers get for sharing their extra energy with the grid. If this goes into effect, it would be the most extreme cut to net metering anywhere in the country. Here's what it would do. It would slash, by cutting that credit by so drastically, by 75%, it slashes solar users' monthly bill savings. And while it's slashing those monthly bill savings, it also increases utility profits. Remember I said earlier, utilities right now don't really profit on that extra energy you send back to the grid, nor should they, because they didn't pay to make it. Now what they get to do is still sell that extra energy to your neighbor for the premium price, but give you bupkis for it, or give people who are on this new net metering program, which will be future solar users, they get bupkis. That's the first thing that it'll do. In the process, it's going to lengthen the average payback period for a solar investment from 6 years to more than 10 years. And that's a big deal because most of us, if we're going to make this kind of investment, we need to see a payoff in a reasonable period of time. Otherwise, it's a little hard to justify the investment. And the utilities know that. And so the essence is, by doing this, by cutting that credit so drastically, it puts solar out of reach for most working families. But that's not all. To be clear, if the CPUC moves forward with this, it'll make both standalone solar systems more expensive than they are today. And it'll also make solar paired with a battery more expensive than they are today. It'll also make solar on low-income homes more expensive too. The CPUC likes to talk a lot about how they're trying to help low-income people. But objectively, this will make going solar more expensive for a low-income household than it would be today. And that's not good. Anywhere else where a government or a state or even a locality has tried to cut the net metering credit this drastically or even close to it, solar adoptions have dropped by half or more. We saw this play out in Nevada, in Hawaii, and in Arizona. And we've even seen this in California with some of the locally run utilities in Turlock and Modesto and in the Coachella Valley. Anywhere that they've done anything remotely close to this kind of cut to the credit, we see solar adoptions drop by half. And that's because it just doesn't make sense anymore for your everyday consumer. So then let's get into the details. This is a little bit wonky, but bear with me. We were getting a lot of questions about how exactly does this work? How exactly do they slash the credit by 75%? So here's how it works. Right now, for people that are on NEM 1 and NEM 2, the credit for surplus energy, for people on NEM 1 and NEM 2, your credit is about 30 cents per kilowatt hour. That's how it works today. If this goes into effect, then for future solar users who would be impacted by this policy, that credit will drop from 30 cents per kilowatt hour to about 5 cents per kilowatt hour. So that's the first part of it. Now, PG&E and Edison residential customers, initially in the first few years of the program, will get a small adder on top of that 5 cents. It'll start about between 2 to 4 cents per kilowatt hour, and then it'll decrease 20% each year over 5 years until eventually everybody is getting a credit of basically about 5 cents per kilowatt hour. Now, folks that are on the CARE or the FERA program will get a few more cents on top of that adder, but not that much more. And then if you live in San Diego gas and electric territory, there is no adder. And then churches, schools, businesses, any of the non-residential solar customers, they also don't get any adder. those folks would, if they want to go solar, they'd be getting 5 cents per kilowatt hour rather than, again, the 30 cents per kilowatt hour that NEM1 and NEM2 customers get. So that's the mechanism. And the CPUC, by the way, by having this adder, you might be wondering, what's the point of the adder? It's not much of anything. They're calling that a glide path. They're saying we're going to gradually step down the net metering program, but that's not really much of a glide path. That's a little bit more of a plane crashing off a cliff. So it's a glide path in name only. So when does this go into effect, and who does this affect? So let's get into that. We don't really know exactly when it goes into effect, but we know the CPUC has said it'll go into effect 120 days after the CPUC votes. The CPUC is scheduled to vote on their proposal on December 15th. They don't meet their deadlines always, but let's say they do. If they do, and let's assume that they do this time, then this proposal would start on April 15th. Again, it is just a proposal. The CPUC has not voted yet, but if they vote on this on December 15th and pass it without any changes, this would start on April 15th. So then for those of you out there that don't have solar yet, but are thinking of getting it, here's some things that you should know, is that if your solar company gets your completed interconnection application to the utility before that sunset date of April 15th, then you will be locked into the current net metering arrangement, which is called NEM2. All right. So it's if you want to go solar, you're thinking of going solar, as long as you get a completed, correct interconnection application to the utility before that sunset date, then you are locked into NEM2, even if it takes a little bit longer to get the system installed and all of that. If you are a current solar user, a couple of things to know. If let's say you have currently solar, but like a year or two from now, you want to add a battery, you can add a battery after that sunset date without losing your net metering status. You can stay on NEM1 or NEM2. And if you are a current solar, but I should say, if you are a current solar user, and let's say in a year or two, you want to add more panels, and you want to do that after the sunset date, if you add more panels, you could be forced onto the new net metering, the NEM3, if you add too many panels. So generally, existing solar users will be able to add a battery without losing their current net metering status. But current solar users will usually not be able to expand their system, to add more panels without losing their net metering status. Another good thing to know is that if you're a current solar user and you sell your home after the sunset date, the new owner does not get to stay on NEM1 or NEM2. They will be forced onto the new net metering, onto NEM3. So that's a little bit about the timeline. And then let's talk a little bit about what's not in the CPUC proposal, just for a brief moment. There's no solar tax in the CPUC proposal. There is some ominous language in there that indicates that we're not done with the solar tax yet, and they might take it up again next year, but it is not in this proposal. In addition, there are no retroactive changes on existing solar users. This will affect people that go solar after it goes into effect. And so you might be thinking, if you have solar already, cool, I'm done, nice work. And I will say nice work, because it took a lot of work to get these things off the table. But I want to make a plea to you to stay in this fight, please. This current proposal is still is extreme, and it will totally cheat people who don't have solar right now who want to get it someday. And so just think about your friends and your family members, your neighbors, your coworkers, your fellow churchgoers, people that, or even just your church that might not have solar someday, but might want it someday. And let's leave that option open for them. Let's give them the same opportunity that us solar users have. So please, I want to just ask you, stay in this fight. We're going to need your voice. But you should also just do a small little pat on the back for the work, a good job, well done. And now let's get to work on what we need to do to take this all the way to the finish line. I do just want to show this one more time, just to kind of see how much more expensive rooftop solar gets under this proposal. Right now, a payback period is between 5 and 7 years, depending on the utility that you're in. Under the CPUC's proposal, you can see it almost doubles. And that's a really big deal for consumers. So I'm just throwing that in there as an extra, like just to, if you're still not quite sure how extreme this is, believe me, this is extreme. Anywhere this has been done, anywhere in the country, it has been devastating for the solar market and devastating for the ability of working people to get solar. So, excuse me. So what's the CPUC's rationale for this? It's the same as the utilities. I'm showing you a screenshot from a website that the utilities have set up to try to make their case. The utilities can't say that they don't like rooftop solar because it screws their profits. They have to say something else. And so what they say, and what the CPUC also says, is that you solar users are freeloaders, that you've taken your ball and you've gone home, that by making your own energy, you are not paying your fair share of the grid. And as a result, all of those costs are getting shifted onto people who don't have solar. And they call that the cost shift. And you might have even heard that, somewhere in the news. And you are the responsible for the cost shift. You are the reason why people are paying out of their nose in electricity bills. Excuse me, so sorry about that. So you might be wondering then, is that true? The answer is no. The opposite is true. You are actually saving all ratepayers money. There is a cost shift though, and this is what it is. It's long distance power lines. It's those power lines that connect all the faraway energy to our towns and cities. And last year, all of us ratepayers were charged $9 billion to pay for building those power lines, maintaining those power lines, and also for wildfire mitigation. And the thing is, that's what utilities make their money on. They actually don't make their profit on selling you the energy. They make their profit on building those power lines. The CPUC gives them a guaranteed profit of between 8 and 12% a year from every dollar that they spend building and maintaining long distance power lines. So of course they want to spend more of that. So then here's the problem, is that there's one thing that reduces the need to have to spend as much money on long distance power lines. And that turns out it's rooftop solar. Rooftop solar, when you make your own energy, you don't use those power lines as much. And because of that, there's so much rooftop solar that it actually reduces wear and tear and reduces the need to have to build and maintain those power lines as much. So that's good for all ratepayers, but it also reduces utility profits. And that is what this fight is all about. So it just bears repeating again that rooftop solar saves everyone money. The most detailed energy modeling that has been done found that rooftop solar, if we keep it growing, could help to cut $120 billion of costs out of the grid over the next 30 years and essentially save all ratepayers $300 per year. And that's a big deal. And so let's just remember that. And next time you hear or read a news story that accuses you of being responsible for rising utility bills, it's just not true. The opposite is true. So then, how can California, if this is all true, how do they justify it? How do they justify cutting solar while pushing more clean energy at the same time? And I wish the answer was more complicated, but it's actually quite simple and something that you probably already knew, which is that the utilities have an enormous amount of power and money, and they use it to influence our government. So the utilities spent about $44 million in both campaign contributions and lobbying between 2017 and 2021. And they've given money at every level of government, from the top all the way to the bottom. And it's breathtaking how much money, the checks that they and their surrogates can write, and the amount of influence and fear that they're able to strike in the hearts of politicians and regulators. And at the CPUC, the utilities over the years, their lobbyists are just so embedded, and just ingrained in the culture in the CPUC is such that when the CPUC was starting this whole process, they had to, they do some of their own math, but mostly they just hire outside consultants to do their math. And the consultants that they hired are literally affiliated with the utilities. There's one consulting firm in particular called E3, and they've done a lot of the modeling that the CPUC is using to justify their extreme proposal. And if you just take a look at E3's client list, and we have this all published on our website, you can see their clients include PG&E, Edison, San Diego Gas and Electric, and frankly, most of the other private North American utilities. In any other common sense world, this would be a conflict of interest, but not to the CPUC. So as a result, the CPUC's math is riddled both with conflicts of interest and then just accounting tricks that give the CPUC the cover to make it seem like they're doing something based on math, but really it's based on a conflict of interest. And so that's what's going on under the hood. So that's the bad news, but I need you to remember that rooftop solar is incredibly popular. We've done polling, and this has been consistent with polling pretty much that's been done over the last 5 to 10 years. 71% of Californians of all political parties want more solar, and 80% of voters strongly support net metering. And this is with very neutral language that we've written that people just think it just intuitively makes sense. And most of the major newspapers have taken our side. This is just a few examples. And then Californians have rallied across the state to protect solar. More on this issue than any other issue in CPUC history. over 170,000 people have written or called or marched. And it has been just a tremendous effort. And it's gotten us to the point where we've been able to take some of the most extreme things from the CPUC off the table, but we have not been able to take the final extreme thing off the table, the 75% cut to the net metering credit that would stop future solar users from being able to get the solar. And that's what we now need to fight. And so the big question here is, will Governor Newsom side with the people? And this is an unwritten chapter. He has not taken a position on this proposal. So this is now his moment to just decide, am I going to side with the people or am I going to side with the utilities? Am I going to side with my own clean energy goals, my own climate change goals, my own stated objectives around giving ratepayers relief from high bills, helping people avoid blackouts? It's an obvious answer for him, but we're going to probably have to help him make sure that he takes our side. And that's what this whole next couple of months is really going to be about. And so I want to go through now 4 things that you can do right now to help increase the likelihood that we get to a good outcome. And this will not be the only things that we're going to be putting forward to you. And so if you're not signed up on the Solar Rights Alliance website, you should, and we're going to flash that across the screen. But I want to first go through the 4 things that you should do right away. And the first thing is to send an email to Governor Newsom. Now, many of you have already done this. In fact, I'm sure all of you have done this. Do it again, and this time we need to reference this recent proposal from the CPUC. Send him an email and tell him the CPUC's most recent proposal is too extreme, and then just whatever else you want to say. If you go to the website that's listed on the screen right here, we've got a pre-written letter there for you, and you can personalize that letter however much or however little you want to. But the bottom line is, do that and do it right away. We want to make sure that his inbox is flooded with as many people as possible. And then after you do it, please share it with other people so that he can start to just get lots and lots of emails from people telling him the CPUC's proposal is too extreme. That's the first thing. The second thing to do, and this might sound a little funny, but I'm going to bear with me, is to write a letter to the editor to your local newspaper. And it's a letter to the editor is 150 words. And you would be surprised, even in this digital age, with all the social media and all that kind of stuff, you would be surprised how powerful a 150-word letter to the editor to your local newspaper, just how powerful that is. And here's why. Well, first off, politicians actually read the letters to the editor, believe it or not. And it's a real good gauge of voter sentiment. But equally important, the editors of the newspaper notice it as well. And when they get a lot of letters from people on a particular issue, that makes them think we ought to write more about this issue. This is of high interest to our readers. And they tend to take the slant of the people who are writing the letters. And so you can help to shape your newspaper's coverage and your editorial board's coverage. And you've already done this. One of the reasons why most of the major newspapers have taken our side and why the articles have generally been in our favor has been because of your letters to the editor. There have been a lot of articles in the last couple of days about the CPUC's proposal. So you should find that your paper will be quite receptive. And all you have to do is go to your newspaper's website and, or even call them and go, what's the instructions for submitting a letter to the editor? And it's fairly straightforward. And you might be wondering, like, well, what do I write? It's got to be 150 words. That's the first thing. The second thing is just make sure that you say that the CPUC's recent rooftop solar proposal is too extreme, still too extreme. Start there and then write anything else that you want that just comes from the heart. And you just can't go wrong. As long as you keep it within 150 words, you have a really good chance of getting it printed, and you have a good chance of influencing the editor of that paper so that we get more media coverage, and more media coverage will influence Governor Newsom more so than many other things that we could do. So that's the second thing. The third thing is I highly encourage you to sign up to go give a verbal public comment to the CPUC, to speak to the CPUC. And the CPUC is actually going to, they have 2 meetings coming up before they meet on December 15th. So we have 2 opportunities before they vote to give them a piece of your mind. And the first one is going to be tomorrow morning. And then the second one is going to be on December 1st. And you can sign up. Their meetings start at 11 a.m. You can phone in, so you don't have to go anywhere. And you can sign up and give 1 minute of public comment. And our website, if you go to our homepage, you can scroll down and it gives you some instructions on how you can sign up to speak to the CPUC. So all you have to do is go to our website, scroll down a little bit, and you'll see there's a button to go and give a public comment to the CPUC. I'm going to be emailing this information out to everybody who is registered for this webinar, but I want to just put the bug in your ear to give a verbal public comment at an upcoming meeting, either tomorrow or on December 1st, or both. So that's the third action. The fourth action, finally, is to spread the word as much as you possibly can to everybody that you can just imagine, and however you see fit. So post something on Nextdoor or on Facebook, forward an email or write an email to your to anyone who you want to send an email to. Distribute a flyer to your neighbors. On our website, again, if you go to our website and you scroll down just a little bit, you'll see there's little buttons that give you some tips and tools for all of these things. And you can always get in touch with us. You can just send an email to us. You'll go to the bottom of the website and you'll see our email address. We try to respond to every email that comes in, so we can give you as much information as you need to get you off to the races. These are the four things. Email the governor. If you could just put up that URL again, that would be great. Thank you. Email the governor right away and tell him the CPUC's proposal is too extreme, whatever else you want to say, and then write a letter to the editor. Then please sign up for a CPUC and speak at a CPUC meeting. And then finally is spread the word however you see fit. So now let's take some questions. We're gonna move now to the Q&A part of all of this. And many people had submitted questions in advance. I'm going to start with a few of those, and then we're also going to take questions that are coming in. If you're on social media, you can actually post your question in the comments, and we will try to get to them. And again, we're not going to be able to get to all the questions, but we're going to send a recording of this webinar out to everybody who registered. We're going to post it on our website. You can go to our website to email your questions that didn't get answered, but let's go through a few things. So I want to start with Nancy's question. Nancy asks, is the CPUC diluting our power by maintaining grandfathering? So I think what Nancy is getting at here is going, obviously it's good that existing solar users are not going to be affected by what's been proposed. But I think what Nancy is suggesting is there a little bit of a divide and conquer strategy going on, here? And I think that that's exactly what's going on, but in a slightly different way than I think what you're suggesting, Nancy, which is this. Do you know the psychological trick? We've all done this, especially when we were kids, of you ask for more than what you actually want, so that then when you actually ask for what you want, it looks like you're compromising. That's what's going on here. Had the CPUC simply, a year ago, proposed to cut the net metering credit by 75%, that would have been too extreme, and we would have been marching in the streets over that. But instead, they loaded that down with several other things that should have never been in there to begin with. The solar tax, taking on grandfathering. And what it did was then it made it seem like when they took those really, really extreme things off the table that the CPUC was compromising. But they're not, because a 75% cut to the net metering credit is lethal to rooftop solar. And so obviously there is a psychological trick going on here. This is a very common strategy. And so what I would just want to do is go, I don't think this is a compromise. What they put on the table is still too extreme. It would be lethal to the growth of rooftop solar. And I'm just hoping that, people who are out here and watching and paying attention to this see this as their fight, even if you're not exactly personally affected, sort of like let's fight for everybody to be able to have the right to make energy from the sun. So I hope that answers your question, Nancy. Mel is asking, with Governor Newsom's electric car targets, we're going to need every electron we can get. So why isn't the CPUC helping to put more electrons on the grid where they're needed? It's a good question. And I wanted to pick this question to just remind everyone of just what the state is trying to do. They're trying to get off fossil fuels in like just a little bit more than a decade by basically taking all of the energy that right now we are burning through cars and furnaces and all that kind of stuff, convert that all to renewable energy, and then stuff that through the wires of PG&E, Edison, and San Diego Gas and Electric. And to make that happen, we are going to need to generate so much more renewable energy than we're doing today. And we're not on track anywhere close to generating that renewable energy, putting us at risk of more blackouts and unreliable energy. And so why would you be slowing down rooftop solar? This is counter to what the governor is trying to do on getting everyone into electric cars. Why would anyone buy an electric car if there isn't the actual electricity to charge it? And so it's a very good question. There is not a very good answer, but it's one reason that when you're reaching out and writing your letter and making your calls to Governor Newsom, you should ask him that question. And maybe if enough people ask that, that will bring him into this fight and take a stand. So Esteban has a question, which is the CPUC's new proposal intended to push us to buy more batteries? The answer is that's what the CPUC says that they're trying to do. So what they say they're trying to do is by slashing the net metering credit really, really drastically, they're basically saying we don't want you to rely on the grid for this energy. We want you to get a battery so that then you don't have to rely on net metering to make it all work. And frankly, we would love to have all the solar attached to a battery. But I think, as many of you pointed out in your questions, for many of us, batteries are still a bit too spendy to get right now. And it's going to take a couple of years. It took 9 years for rooftop solar to scale up, to actually get affordable enough that everyday people could get it. And it probably will take, that length of time to make batteries to that point too. I mean, right now, 14% of all solar is attached to a battery. So if we want to get 100% of solar attached to a battery, which I think is a really good goal, we have to kind of think through a lot of things. You have to think through the price of batteries for the consumer. You got to think through the supply chain. There's definitely some supply chain issues. You got to think through all those things. And the solar industry has been doing what I can tell is a pretty good job of getting batteries out there. But if the CPUC wants to get people into batteries, the better thing to do would just be to help people get more solar and then supercharge the battery market by doing a big initiative to make batteries cheaper for people. So to do a carrot approach rather than this stick approach, which just isn't going to work and only benefits the utilities. So this is a backwards proposal that, yes, it does claim that it's trying to get people into batteries, but it's going all the wrong way to do it. And it's going to result in basically both solar and battery, people that want that not being able to get it. All right. So David has a question, which is just, is there any research or pilot projects that demonstrate evidence of that a decentralized grid is better than a centralized one? And I went over this, but I think this is a good question because it allows me to just repeat something, which is that the best energy modeling that's been done looked at two scenarios. One where we try to get to clean energy goals with just centralized energy only and not much rooftop solar. And then one where we do it with centralized energy, but also with rooftop solar and batteries. And the scenario with rooftop solar and batteries is a hands down winner. It's $120 billion cheaper over the next 30 years because you eliminate a lot of the costs of long distance infrastructure. But it has also been demonstrated to just be more resilient. And we don't need to look into the future to know that. In this last, that week where it was Flex Alert hell, if you remember in August, rooftop solar really helped to save the day. If you look at a chart of some of the peak times of the day, if there hadn't been the 1.5 million solar rooftops working during that time, remember this is the hot days in August, if there hadn't been that solar on the grid, we would have been totally into blackouts. Rooftop solar reduces demand on the grid. So it's already working, having elements of a decentralized grid paired with a centralized one. But it gets even better. Remember that I said that 14% of all rooftop solar has a battery. That's about 90,000 batteries. And it turns out that during the Flex Alert week that we had in August, those 90,000 batteries really came through. And in fact, as the sun was going down and the solar panels were not generating as much energy, those 90,000 batteries not only were helping the owner of the batteries keep their lights on, but there was a lot of extra energy in those batteries. And that extra energy discharged into the grid right when the sun was going down. And those 90,000 batteries each day discharged the equivalent of a medium-sized natural gas plant into the grid. So it's working, and all we need to do is just keep it growing. And so yeah, lots of evidence, more than a pilot project, really, it's real life, is showing that combining the old system with this new decentralized system is a way better way to go from every way you look at it. Okay, so let's go into some other comments. Rob is just saying batteries are really expensive, so how do we overcome this with something more reasonable? Yeah, people are getting batteries, but they're still quite expensive. And I'll just say again, it took 9 years to get rooftop solar to scale up. And it's going to probably take that amount of time. It could be less. This is Governor Newsom's opportunity, right? He could tomorrow go, this proposal is too extreme. We need to keep rooftop solar growing, but we need to do more than that. He could say, just like Arnold Schwarzenegger said, I want 1 million solar rooftops in the next 10 years. Governor Newsom could say, I want 1 million solar powered batteries in our homes and churches and schools over the next 10 years. He could do that tomorrow and use the force of his administration to lead us forward. And that's the kind of vision that would really, it's popular and it would really solve a lot of problems. And so that's, what needs to be done. And, obviously what the CPUC is putting on the table is so backwards from the direction that we ought to be headed in. And again, this is an opportunity for Governor Newsom. All right, Gil has a question. Gil is asking, will being a CCA customer help or hurt even more than being a solar customer? So for those of you who don't know, a CCA is like a local community choice aggregator. They're popping up all over the state where your local municipality is offering you the opportunity to sign up with them, and you can actually buy the electricity from them rather than the utility. And a lot of people are signing up and kind of wondering, hey, is this good? And we're agnostic on whether it's good or bad. That's up for you, the consumer, to decide. But what I would say is if you're either already part of a CCA and getting your electricity from them, or you are considering becoming a part of it, and you're wondering, let's say this goes into effect, which obviously we're hoping it doesn't, should you still be a member of the CCA? I think you're just going to have to call your local CCA and just ask them to tell you what their net metering policy is. And you probably want to call and just ask them now what it is, that'd be good to know. And then if this goes into effect, you should ask them too. And so I think you just have to, it's on an individual basis. Some of the CCAs are good, some of them aren't so good. So it really is very much a local decision. Okay, Jeff is asking, can you talk about our coalition partners and the positions that they've taken? Who else is in this fight besides Solar Rights Alliance? I'm really glad you asked that, Jeff, because I realize I am remiss in saying that the coalition that has built up around this is really, really big. Solar Rights Alliance is one of 600 nonprofit organizations, cities, school districts, members of Congress, other elected officials, and community leaders that have spoken out. So when I said 170,000 people have written and called and marched, those 170,000 people were educated and mobilized by more than 600 nonprofits, cities, schools, elected officials, community leaders. It's really remarkable. And most of those groups are not directly talking to the CPUC. They're educating and mobilizing their members, but there are some other great organizations that we are working with that are directly parties to the CPUC proceeding. And these would be groups like the Protect Our Communities Foundation, the California Solar and Storage Association, Vote Solar, the 350 Bay Area, and there's others that I'm blanking on, but those would be some of the Center for Biological Diversity are organizations that have been working really hard to be parties in that proceeding. And generally we've been aligned with them all along. And so that's that, and their positions have been very, very similar to the ones that we've been taking. And over the last week, we have found that most of the folks in our coalition are looking at the CPUC's proposal in very similar ways. And so certainly there's strength in numbers, and I'm looking forward to continuing to work with all of those organizations and leaders to ensure that we can take this to the finish line in a good way. Barbara is asking, how can I help? And I just love that question. So I wanted Barbara to just say, I think that's the best question you can ask. And so this is an opportunity to just flash on the screen again. If you do nothing else, to please send an email to the governor telling him the CPUC's revised proposal is too extreme. It's still too extreme, and we need his help. We need him to step in and take charge of the situation. So that's the top thing you can do. After you send that email, we will take you to a page that will then remind you of some of the other things that I was suggesting on this webinar, like sending a letter to the editor, spreading the word, speaking at a CPUC meeting, and so on. So, and by the way, this is not the only thing that we'll be asking you to do. We are going to be planning a lot of things over the next month. These are just the first things that we need to do to get out of the gates. We're planning in-person events all over the state. And this is actually a pitch, so thank you, Barbara, for this question, that if we end up organizing an in-person event near you, anywhere remotely near you, 30-minute drive, 45-minute drive, that kind of thing, I'm going to ask you to please consider attending the event. And here's why. The in-person events that we've been doing, the rallies and the protests and all that kind of stuff, have been very, very effective at getting the news media to cover this issue. And when the news media covers that issue, it puts Governor Newsom in the spotlight. And it makes it more likely that he's going to respond to all the emails and the phone calls. It really is like the more warm bodies that come together, the more that the new TV cameras like to focus on it. And so we are going to be launching that, not right away. The first thing we want to do is just get the basic information out to you all. I'll sound the alarm, spread the word, start to get Governor Newsom's inbox freed up, but just look for emails from us. They're going to be coming in pretty short order about some additional things that you can be doing on top of all of that. So, okay, we've got about 10 minutes left, so we're going to take a few more questions. Near says that, asks, is it true that all new housing construction requires solar on it? And if so, how would this new proposal impact this? That's a good question. So there is a rule now in the state that all new homes that are built, have to come with solar. And some people love that idea, some people hate that idea. I'm not going to weigh in on that. I'm just going to say that's the rule. And the CPUC's proposal would affect those homes. If you go into that home, you don't even get that adder that I was talking about. You start the credit that you would get for sharing your extra energy with the grid if you buy one of those homes would be just 5 cents per kilowatt hour, literally 80% less than what solar users today get. And that's too bad, because that would be too bad if that happens, because, although it is true when you put solar into a home while it's being constructed, the solar is cheaper than if you're retrofitting, which is what most of us do. But nonetheless, it still does increase the cost of that home. And by reducing the credit that drastically, it's going to make it a lot harder for that homeowner to get the payback. And since people don't necessarily stay in their homes for 10 years or more, they might never get that payback, and those homes go underwater. So it's another example of where the state has a policy over here, and the CPUC is proposing something extreme that's going to undermine that policy. And so this is another reason why we need to just make sure that the governor steps in and just takes charge of the situation. He's got all these goals, his agencies are doing all these things, and the CPUC over here is proposing these really extreme things that are just going to undermine all of that. And we obviously need that to stop. Okay. Josh is asking, is the CPUC's proposal a done deal, or is there a chance it can be overturned? The CPUC's proposal is not a done deal. It is just a proposal. They are scheduled to vote on it on December 15th, and we absolutely can impact it. When the CPUC originally proposed that solar tax, everyone thought that was a done deal, and nobody expected us to be able to take that stuff off the table, and we did. So now we have less time, but we also have a lot of people who are a lot more educated and wise to what's going on, and we just need now to turn the switch on and make it really, really clear that this is just unacceptable. And again, the focus has to be primarily on Governor Newsom, to have him step in and just tell the CPUC this is not acceptable. We need to keep rooftop solar growing. That's consistent with the state. So that's absolutely not a done deal. You can make an impact. We have made an impact up to this point. We need to keep this whole thing going. I used to be a marathon runner back in the day, and this is just like a marathon. It actually might be a little harder than a marathon, but fortunately something that more of us can do. All right, we're going to take a few more questions here. David from YouTube is asking, if NEM 3.0 gets approved, so NEM 3.0 is the parlance that the CPUC used to describe their proposal, how might it impact folks who contract for solar panels that might not be completed by April 15th? Okay, so you're asking for a clarification. If you don't have solar, but you are in the process of getting solar, as long as your installer, your solar company, gets a completed and correct connection application to the utility before the cutoff date, in this case, it might very well likely be April 15th, but whatever the cutoff date is, as long as they get that application in before the cutoff date, and that application is correctly done, so you'll have to get a confirmation from the utility, yep, correctly done, then you would be in under the current arrangement, NEM 2. And that's the case even if the construction takes a little bit longer than the cutoff date to put into place. So, so you can complete the construction after the cutoff date as long as your application to the utility is accepted and done correctly. And I want to clarify, there are different applications that have to happen. So there are also permitting applications that have to go to your city or your county. That's different. What we're talking about is the application to the utility to connect. And as long as that gets in before the cutoff date, you should be okay. So even if the construction takes longer. So that's a good clarification. Greg Ferry on Facebook is asking, will the CPUC be taking public comment? Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Greg, for that question. That's why I'm really pushing for people to sign up to give a comment, a verbal comment to the CPUC, either at their meeting tomorrow or on December 1st. a verbal comment is one of the best things because most people don't take the time to be able to do that. So if you can do that, and again, you can do it by phone. You don't have to actually go to the CPUC. That makes a big difference. But you can also go to the CPUC's website and you can submit a comment there. We have information on how you can do all of these things by going to our website. We've got it, a lot of that there. And if you have any questions, you can send us an email. And I think anyone that's corresponded knows that we try to respond to every email that comes in. Taking a second here to just ask our producer to put the organization's email address on the screen so that if you have some kind of follow-up or just something that doesn't get captured here, you can send us a simple email and we will take our pains to respond. And so I'm just flagging that I threw that into our little private chat, and hopefully you can put that on there. Okay, we got another kind of detailed question about panels. So I wanted to take Tom Logia's question from YouTube. And Tom is asking, yeah, thank you. So that's our email address, and we'll put it up a few more times. But Tom, thank you. Great, perfect. Tom is asking, if he adds 4 or more panels to his 20-panel array, will he be moved to NEM3 or can he stay on NEM2? I'm not good at doing math in my head, so let me just tell you what the rule is. If you're currently on NEM1 or NEM2, and this goes into effect, if you add more panels that add up to more than 10% of your existing system, or more than 1 kilowatt more than your existing system, whichever is the bigger number, then you will lose your net metering status and you will be moved to NEM3. So basically, you got to make sure if you're adding more panels that it doesn't exceed 10%, a 10% increase. And your solar company should know this like the back of their hand. And so you want to go over this with them and then just make sure, and then just dot your I's, cross your T's. But you got to make sure that if you're adding it, you don't add any more than 10% from your existing array. And if you do, you risk jeopardizing your net metering status. Again, this is if the proposal goes into effect. And remember, this does not apply to batteries. So if somewhere down the road this goes into effect and you want to add a battery, that will not jeopardize your net metering status. The thing that will jeopardize your net metering status is if you expand your system beyond 10% more than your existing capacity. Okay, let's see. I love this. This is not a question, but it's a comment from Densey from Facebook, where he's just saying, we're going to stay in the fight for future rooftop solar users, Dave. Thank you for all that's been done so far and for keeping us in the fight. That's a great way to end. Thank you, Densey. It's people like Densey who have solar, but are fighting both for themselves, but also for our friends and our neighbors and our families, but also our churches and our small businesses and our food banks and our schools and our fire stations. I think this is a fight that's worth having. We have made a lot of noise. We've surprised a lot of political insiders over the last year. We've got now about a month left, and we've got a decision maker here who has a really big choice to make, and you can help him make that choice. And so let's be loud, let's be thoughtful, let's be gracious, of course, and but let's also be loud and be persistent. I'm going to send a recording of this webinar out to everybody who registered. I'm going to send a lot of links out with additional, so you can dig in. Let's put our email address on the screen one more time for people, and if you have that. And then after we do that, let's put our website up again one more time, where people can sign up. If you're not signed up on the Solar Rights Alliance list, then you can sign up at solarrights.org/signup. So these are all very, very simple things. So I want to again thank you all for tuning in. It's been a real pleasure to fight this fight alongside with you. And let's go fight win. Let's make this happen. So thank you.